The sun was shining, the waves were rolling in gently, and the beach was alive with the sound of laughter and families enjoying a beautiful day. Among them was a young girl, no older than 8, playing near the shoreline with a family member. She looked carefree, her giggles carried by the wind as she built sandcastles and splashed in the water. It seemed like the perfect scene, pure, innocent, and full of joy. But not everyone on the beach that day saw it the same way. From his post at the Lifeguard tower, Jake, an experienced lifeguard with years of training, kept his eyes on the crowd. His job wasn't just about watching for swimmers in distress. It was about reading situations and noticing when something felt off. As he scanned the beach, his gaze lingered on the young girl and her companion. At first glance, there was nothing unusual about them. But then Jake picked up on subtle details, a hesitation in the girl's body language, a tension in how the family member interacted with her. It wasn't something most people would notice, but to Jake, it sent a faint alarm ringing in his mind. Still, Jake couldn't act on a hunch alone. He leaned forward, adjusting his sunglasses, and focused more closely. Was he overthinking? Or was there something here that required immediate attention? The waves lapped at their feet, and the family member glanced around nervously, as if checking to see who was watching. A split second later, Jake saw something that made his heart race. Without wasting another moment, Jake grabbed his whistle and stood up, ready to act. He didn't know exactly what was happening, but every instinct told him he needed to intervene. Time was critical, and hesitation could mean the difference between a safe outcome and a tragedy. What had Jake noticed? Was it all just a misunderstanding, or was his sharp intuition about to save the day? Stay tuned as we unravel this gripping story of courage, quick thinking, and the difference one person can make when they trust their gut. Jake's heart pounded as he moved quickly down the tower steps, his whistle dangling from his hand. He tried to keep his demeanor calm so as not to alarm anyone on the busy beach, but his mind was racing. What exactly had he seen? Was it the uneasy glance the family member gave, or the way the girl hesitated when he spoke to her? Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, and his years of training had taught him to trust that instinct. As he walked closer to the waterline, Jake replayed the moment in his head. The girl had been playing, her small hands digging into the wet sand, but she hadn't seemed fully relaxed. Her laughter had a nervous edge, like she was forcing herself to act normal. The family member, a man in his mid-40s, dressed in a loose shirt and cargo shorts, stood nearby looking around a bit too much, not like someone simply enjoying a day at the beach. Jake noticed these things because he had seen similar behaviors before. They didn't always mean something bad, but they were often clues worth investigating. Jake kept his eyes on them as he moved through the crowd. The man's hand rested on the girl's shoulder, and she stiffened slightly, her body language almost shrinking. Jake felt his stomach tighten. He didn't want to jump to conclusions. People interact differently, and it wasn't fair to assume the worst. But the girl's expression was hard to ignore. It wasn't fear exactly, but there was something guarded about her, like she wasn't sure if she was safe. By now, Jake was just a few feet away, close enough to make out their conversation. He paused, pretending to adjust his rescue equipment, while subtly listening in. The man was speaking in a low tone, his words hard to hear over the crashing waves. The girl nodded, her eyes darting to the side, as though she was looking for someone or something. Jake noticed how she barely spoke, her voice soft and uncertain. He decided it was time to step in. Approaching with a friendly smile, Jake addressed them directly. "Hey there. Beautiful day, isn't it? Just checking in. Everything okay here?" The man turned, his face tightening slightly as he replied, "Yeah, everything's fine." But something in his tone made Jake's concern grow stronger. Jake kept his stance relaxed, but his mind was anything but. The man's response had been quick, almost dismissive, and while it could have been nothing, it still felt off. Jake had encountered countless beachgoers during his shifts, but there was something here that didn't sit right. He looked at the girl, her eyes meeting his for a fleeting moment before darting away. That single glance felt like a quiet plea, though Jake couldn't be sure if he was reading too much into it. "Great to hear," Jake replied, keeping his tone light. "We like to make sure everyone's having a safe and fun time out here. Can't be too careful with the waves today." He gestured toward the water, using the moment to subtly scan their surroundings. The beach was packed, families with umbrellas, kids running in and out of the surf, and groups of friends soaking up the sun. But no one else seemed to be paying attention to the pair Jake was focused on. The man gave a small nod, his expression tightening further. "We're fine. Thanks." He placed a hand on the girl's shoulder again, this time a bit more firmly. She flinched, just a little, but enough for Jake to catch it. That was all he needed to decide he wasn't walking away from this. Jake crouched slightly, lowering himself to the girl's eye level. "Hi there," he said gently, offering her a reassuring smile. "Are you having fun today? Building some cool sandcastles?" The girl hesitated, her lips parting as if she wanted to say something, but then she glanced at the man. His expression stayed neutral, but his presence was commanding, and it seemed to silence her. Jake straightened and kept his tone casual, though his heart was racing. "You know, I think I saw a shell collector down the beach earlier. They were finding some amazing ones. Maybe you'd like to check it out." It was a harmless suggestion, but also a way to test the waters. The man's grip on her shoulder tightened slightly, and he shook his head. "We're good here," he said firmly. "She doesn't need to go anywhere." Jake nodded slowly, careful not to escalate things too quickly. "Of course, just let me know if you need anything." As he stepped back, his mind raced. He needed more information, but time wasn't on his side. Something wasn't adding up, and he was determined to figure out what it was before it was too late. Jake walked away slowly, giving the appearance of retreat, but he wasn't done. His lifeguard instincts told him that this situation needed closer attention. As he made his way back toward the lifeguard station, he kept an eye on the man and the girl. The man appeared agitated now, shifting on his feet and looking around the crowded beach, like he was searching for an escape route. Jake's gut tightened. Whatever was happening, it wasn't normal. Jake reached for his radio, casually bringing it to his mouth, while keeping his gaze fixed on the pair. "Base, this is Tower 2, he said, his voice low but steady. "I've got a potential situation near the waterline, east side of the beach. Male, mid-40s, gray shirt, cargo shorts, with a young girl. Something's not sitting right. Can you send backup for a wellness check?" The dispatcher on the other end responded immediately, promising support was on the way. Jake's heart pounded as he tried to balance patience with urgency. He knew backup would take a few minutes, but every second felt critical. His eyes darted back to the man and the girl. The man was crouching down now, speaking in hushed tones, and the girl seemed frozen, barely nodding in response. Jake's instincts screamed at him to act, but he knew he had to tread carefully. One wrong move could escalate the situation. A beachgoer approached Jake, asking for directions to the restrooms. Jake gave a quick, polite answer, all while keeping the pair in his peripheral vision. When he glanced back, he noticed the man was now leading the girl away from the shoreline, heading toward the parking lot. Jake's pulse quickened. The casual demeanor was gone, replaced by a sense of urgency in the man's movements. The girl looked over her shoulder, her expression a mix of hesitation and fear. Jake knew he couldn't wait any longer. Abandoning all pretense, Jake stepped into their path, raising his hand in a calm but authoritative manner. "Hey, sorry to bother you again," he said, his voice steady but firm. "It's part of our protocol to check in when kids leave the beach area. Can I ask a few quick questions?" The man's face hardened. "We're leaving." "There's no need for questions," he snapped, his grip on the girl's arm tightening visibly. The girl winced, and Jake's eyes locked on hers. He saw it again, that fleeting, silent plea for help. Jake stood his ground, his voice unwavering. "I understand, sir, but I need to make sure everything's okay. It'll only take a minute." The tension between them was palpable now, the air thick with unspoken conflict. Jake could feel the weight of the moment, knowing the next few seconds could change everything. The man's eyes narrowed, his posture stiffening as he pulled the girl a step closer to him. "Look, we're in a hurry," he said, his voice growing sharper. "We don't have time for this." His tone was defensive now, almost hostile, and it sent a ripple of unease through Jake. But Jake didn't budge. Years of experience had taught him how to handle confrontation without escalating it, and he wasn't about to let this man intimidate him. The girl glanced up at Jake again, her small hands clenched into fists at her sides. There was something she wanted to say. Jake could see it in her hesitant movements, the way her lips parted slightly before pressing shut again. But she didn't speak, and the man's grip on her arm remained firm. Jake took a deep breath, his mind racing as he calculated his next move. Just as Jake was about to speak again, a voice called out from behind them. "Excuse me." A woman in her early 30s, carrying a large beach bag, approached hurriedly. She looked flustered, her face red from the sun and a mix of emotions Jake couldn't quite read. "What's going on here?" she asked, her gaze shifting between Jake, the man, and the girl. The man's expression changed instantly, his features hardening further, but there was also a flicker of panic in his eyes. Jake turned to the woman, his instincts telling him this wasn't just a random passerby. "Do you know them?" he asked cautiously, gesturing toward the man and the girl. The woman nodded quickly, her eyes now fixed on the girl, who stood frozen like a statue. "Yes," she said firmly. "That's my niece." The man immediately bristled. "She's fine." "We're leaving," he said, his voice laced with irritation. But the woman wasn't backing down. "No, you're not." She shot back, stepping closer. "I've been looking for her everywhere. What are you doing with her?" Jake's pulse quickened as the tension between the two adults escalated. The girl shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting between them. The man tightened his grip on her arm again, and that was all Jake needed to see. "Sir," Jake said, his voice cutting through the argument like a blade, "let go of her now." The man hesitated for a split second, but it was long enough for Jake to step forward, positioning himself between the man and the girl. The woman moved closer, her hand outstretched toward her niece. "It's okay, sweetie," she said gently, her voice trembling. "You're safe now." But before the girl could respond, the man's demeanor shifted again. He took a step back, his eyes darting toward the parking lot, as if considering his next move. Jake could see it, the decision forming in the man's mind to run. The stakes had just risen, and Jake knew they were on the brink of something critical. The man's eyes darted to the parking lot, and Jake could see the tension in his every movement. It was clear he was considering bolting, but Jake had positioned himself to block his path. The beachgoers around them were starting to notice the commotion, curious glances turning into murmurs. Jake knew the situation was reaching its breaking point, and he had to act fast to protect the girl. "Sir," Jake said firmly, his voice cutting through the rising noise of the crowd, "let her go now, or I will call the authorities." He held his ground, his calm but authoritative tone leaving no room for argument. The man hesitated, his grip on the girl loosening slightly as he weighed his options. The woman, clearly distressed but determined, stepped forward. "She's coming with me," she said, her voice steady, even as tears welled in her eyes. Suddenly, the girl broke her silence. "I want to go with her," she said, her voice trembling but loud enough for everyone to hear. It was as if those words shattered whatever hold the man had over the moment. He looked down at her, his expression flickering between anger and defeat. For a moment, it seemed like he might lash out, but then he let go of her arm and took a step back. Jake didn't let his guard down. He gestured for the woman to take the girl, who ran into her arms without hesitation. The scene was emotional, the girl clinging tightly to her aunt, as if she'd been holding her breath for hours. Jake, now standing between them and the man, reached for his radio again. "Base, this is Tower 2. I need local law enforcement at the east side of the beach. Immediate response." The man's panic was evident now. He looked around, realizing he was out of options. But just as Jake thought the situation was under control, the man reached into his pocket, pulling out something small and shiny. The crowd gasped, but it wasn't what Jake expected. It was car keys. The man bolted toward the parking lot, clearly trying to make an escape. Jake signaled to another lifeguard nearby, who had just arrived as backup, to follow the man while he stayed with the girl and her aunt. Minutes later, police arrived, and Jake relayed everything that had happened. The officers were able to track the man down in the parking lot, where he was taken into custody. As it turned out, he wasn't a family member at all, but someone with a troubling history that came to light during the investigation. The girl had been too scared to speak up before, but with her aunt and Jake's support, she felt safe enough to share her story. As the sun began to set on what had been an emotionally charged day, Jake watched the girl and her aunt walk away, hand in hand. He felt a deep sense of relief, knowing that his instincts and quick actions had made a difference. But just as he was about to return to his post, a colleague approached him. "Hey, did you hear?" That guy wasn't acting alone. They found someone waiting in a van nearby. Jake froze, his heart skipping a beat. The day's events had ended safely, but the revelation reminded him how much worse it could have been. Even as the beach settled back into its usual rhythm, the weight of what could have happened lingered. For Jake, it was a powerful reminder that trusting his instincts wasn't just part of the job. It could save lives. As Jake watched the police van pull away, taking the man into custody, he finally allowed himself a deep breath. The tension of the day had been overwhelming, but seeing the girl safe with her aunt made every second worth it. The beach, now bathed in the warm orange glow of the setting sun, felt calmer. Families were packing up, kids were running to collect their last seashells, and the waves lapped gently at the shore as if nothing unusual had happened. Jake returned to his lifeguard station, his mind replaying the events over and over. He couldn't shake the thought of the van and what might have been. It was a chilling reminder that not all dangers on the beach come from the ocean. He had always known his job was about more than watching the waves. It was about keeping everyone safe, no matter what form the threat took. Later, the girl and her aunt approached him one last time. The girl looked up at Jake, her eyes now filled with gratitude instead of fear. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice steady. Her aunt added, "I don't even want to think about what could have happened if you hadn't stepped in. You saved her life today." Jake smiled, feeling a wave of relief and pride. "I'm just glad she's safe," he said. "That's what matters most." As they walked away, Jake felt a profound sense of purpose. This wasn't just another day at work. It was a reminder of why he chose this job in the first place. It wasn't just about the rescues in the water, but about being vigilant, trusting his instincts, and acting when something didn't feel right. He looked out at the beach, still buzzing with life, and felt grateful to be part of something bigger. In the days that followed, the story made its way through the community. and Jake's actions were widely praised. Parents on the beach started to watch their kids more closely, and the lifeguard team had renewed discussions about recognizing subtle signs of distress or danger. For Jake, it was never about the recognition. It was about the girl's safety and knowing he had made a difference when it mattered most. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the beach in twilight, Jake knew this day would stay with him forever. A powerful reminder that even in the most ordinary moments, extraordinary things can happen when someone takes a stand.